Adding lights to your Cinema 4D project will certainly add more dimensions to your models. Now they tend to work hand in hand with texture, so a lot of times when I light scenes, I end up going back and making adjustments to my texture. Now in this video we're going to focus specifically on lighting this Glassy H+ logo, and to do that we need to be in Cinema. So let's make sure we have the lighting.c4d file selected in the project panel and press Command E or Control E on Windows to edit the original file. Once in Cinema, you notice that we have two models. We have our bars, etc., and then we have our plus logo. I'm going to focus specifically on the plus logo for now. If you look at the materials that are applied in the scene, let's double click on the middle material. With our material editor open, notice we have a color channel, transparency, reflection, and specular. All of those things are going to be affected by the lights that we add to our scene. Let's go ahead and close the material editor, and to create a light in the scene, let's go up to our creation tools at the top of the interface, and the rightmost tool here is the light tool. Go ahead and click and hold on that, and you can see the different kinds of lights that we can create. Now in this video we're going to use a spotlight and a traditional Omni light. So let's start with a spotlight. Once we've added the spotlight to the scene, let's move our mouse over the perspective window and then middle click to open up all four views. I can already tell that I want to make the angle of my spotlight larger. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag out just to make it a little wider. Click and drag on the Z-axis handle to reposition this out of the scene a little bit more. You'll see me reposition myself in the different viewers. Just watch the different tools that I'm clicking in the upper right corners to understand where I'm headed. Now, I'm going to right click on the red axis handle to move this kind of offset, because I don't like lights to generally be perfectly perpendicular to the models. Now let's move our light up higher a little bit, since most people are used to seeing things lit from above, like, I don't know, lit by the sun or a street light. Let's go ahead and rotate our light. I'm going to grab my rotation tool. You can press R on your keyboard. Once you see the control bands, let's go ahead and hover over this red axis handle and click and drag. This will allow us to rotate just on the X-axis, just so the light's highlighting the bottle in the right way. Let's click and drag on the other axis band, the Y-axis band. Now we have our spotlight pointed at our scene. If we click in the middle portion of our spotlight, we can control exactly how far that light is being thrown. Now we'll just go and leave it the way it's set right now and go back to our perspective view. As you're working, you'll probably want to render your scene. So you'll see me come up and click this render button. That will go ahead and show me that even with one light I've drastically changed the look of model. Now most of the time when you're lighting an object, you want to use a traditional 3-point light setup. And the way that works, the light we just set up here is our main light. That's going to light the overall scene. Then we want to have a backlight that's behind the model, and then we want to have another light, or the rim light, that's going to be off at the side and slightly more dim. So let's create a backlight. We'll go back up to our light creation tools and just choose a normal one named light. This is also known as an Omni light. If we look at the light options in the attribute panel, you can see it's called Omni light. Each set of lights has different parameters. We could make adjustments to the shadows. We can have them be soft or hard, edge lights or area lights where they simulate the real world, and you can decide whether or not you want the light to actually render in the scene. For example, if I choose volumetric light and then went ahead and rendered the scene, see that light actually rendering in the scene. Inverse volumetric gives you another look. If we go ahead and click on that, you can see inverse volumetric creates these kind of cool shadows, so that's neat and drastic but not quite what I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and just change that back to none and reposition our light back towards the back of our scene. With light 1 selected in the objects panel, let's make sure we have the move tool selected. You can press E on your keyboard to grab the move tool. Now, just so I can see where I'm moving it, I'm going to middle mouse click again to bring up all four windows, and I'll just click and drag in the top view here on the control handle to position our light towards the back of the scene. Notice I'm not positioning it directly behind the model. This is by design because it'll tend to catch more of the geometry if it's not directly perpendicular to what's going on. Now typically a backlight is a little more dim than a traditional front light, so let's go ahead and click right here on the main light and decrease the intensity by clicking and dragging. Now just to see what we're looking at, let's go to our perspective view and render the scene one more time. Now it's definitely got a lot more gloss to the look. If you want to compare the two looks, you can just disable the light by clicking the green checkbox and then going ahead and rendering the scene again. So I like it with the backlight, so we'll enable that and re-render one more time. Now we have to add our third light, and for that we'll create a rim light. Now rather than having to go create yet another light, all we need to do is hold down the Command key on the Mac, Control on Windows, and then click and drag on our light 1. Let's drag up, making sure that we have an arrow that points to the left. This will create yet another light. Now since everything is named light, let's go ahead and rename everything. Let's call light 2 our rim light, and light 1 would be called our backlight. I'm just double clicking and then pressing enter. For this one, we'll just go ahead and call this main for main light. Alright, so the rim light, let's go ahead and click on the rim light and reposition it in the scene towards the front of our logo. Now I'm repositioning in the perspective view because I'm a little used to working in our perspective view. But it's always wise to just jump up into 4-up view, just to make sure that your light is exactly where you're expecting it to be. Now I want to make sure this light is a little low in the scene, and I'm just trying to get it relatively close to the object so that it catches just the edge. So let's go back to our perspective view. And before we render this scene, let's change the color of our rim light. I'm going to click in the white option for the color in the attribute manager and crank the colors around to this blue teal color. Then when I click OK, that's going to add a slight tint to the scene. Now the intensity is set at 59. I think that's okay, but let's render this scene and double check. Now you can see with the rim light, I've got these kind of cool colored highlights that are popping up on the left side of the word sport. I think this color is a little intense, so I'm just going to go ahead and change it a little more towards white and make it not quite as saturated. Then when we click OK, we can go ahead and re-render the scene, and yes, now I'm getting those same highlights, but they're not quite as electric blue. So when it comes to adding lights into your scene, you can see that it's definitely creating a lot more dimension and changing how the materials look for your models. Just remember to take your time and go through the different options, making sure to re-render the scene. Last little tip, if you ever want to go ahead and adjust lights as you're seeing changes being made, click on this middle button for the render region. With render region, you can draw a box over the canvas and it'll render that one specific area. To show you what I mean, I'll go ahead and just click in my object panel and then go back up under render region and click and drag. Now if I make adjustments to these different lights, those adjustments will update in the scene, and we don't always have to come back and click on the re-render button or the render view button. I generally like using render view just so I can see the entire scene. But obviously if you've got a large model, using render region can definitely help speed up your workflow.